Hey everyone, Kyle Erickson here. Is Apple dying? This is a question that's been asked for, well, decades, hundreds of times throughout Apple's history. At certain points in time, it's made more sense than others. During the 90s era, Apple was on the brink of collapse before Steve Jobs swooped in and saved the day. But even after he did and Apple saw success with Jobs at the helm, there were people saying that Apple was doomed. This has been a sentiment that's continued and increased in frequency since the post-Jobs era began in 2011, and it seems like lately a lot of people have had the sentiment that Apple is on a downward trend and they aren't what they used to be. I've been kind of wondering this myself, so today I want to take a close look at this, why it gets brought up so much, and why it is that we perceive things are headed in the wrong direction, and what some people are right and wrong about. So with that said, let's dive in. So to first understand if Apple is dying or headed in the wrong direction, I think it's worth going over what has made Apple successful and how they went from a floundering business that lost $708 million in 1997 to the most valuable company in the world with a market capitalization of over $2 trillion. I'm sure plenty of folks are aware of this, but 1997 is the year that Steve Jobs came back to Apple and took over. And he started turning around Apple by doing a few different things. And I think it's important to take note of these as we look at present day Apple. In the 90s, Apple had a ton of different products available with confusing model names and numbers. Things like the PowerBook, Power Macintosh, the Newton, Apple Network Server, Workgroup Server, and all the products were really just not that good. The operating system was outdated. Windows at that point was much better. And things that Apple seemed to lack any kind of direction. Jobs came in and either scrapped or phased out those products, and over the course of the next few years, Apple went from releasing 15 to 20 products per year to under 10 every year. And without going too deep down the rabbit hole, essentially Apple really narrowed their focus to a handful of products, streamlined their processes and supply chain, and the number one thing, focused on the consumer and how they'd use the products. That right there is really what's made Apple great over the last few decades. Digging into how people use their products and how they can make things less confusing and easier to do, just changing our relationship with those products. I think there's a bit of a misconception that innovation at Apple has always been coming up with new products that didn't previously exist, but that's never really been what Apple's done. Their bread and butter has always been taking products that exist and then transforming them into something that are incredibly well thought out, easy to use, and aesthetically pleasing. In a nutshell, they're disruptive to existing product categories. For example, they didn't invent the portable MP3 player, but they turned it into something that was much easier to use and more powerful, increasing things like storage outside of the bounds of what we were used to seeing on anything previously, and simplifying the button layout so it was less confusing. The iPhone was the same thing. Smartphones existed in a general sense before the iPhone with things like Blackberries and PDAs, but Apple really reimagined what that looked like, going from having to use a trackball or stylus to a fully functional touchscreen. On top of that, Apple has done an incredible job at marketing their products, which historically have been directed at creative individuals, especially if we're talking about the Mac lineup. They know who their audience is and who their products are for, and I think that's why we see so many people that align with the Apple brand. Success stories with products like those and market disruption are really what has propelled Apple forward to where they are today, and the brand has done nothing but get bigger and bigger since Steve Jobs took over, and that has continued with Tim Cook. So why do so many people claim that Apple is doomed? I find this such an interesting subject because there are a bunch of different factors that play into this. Let's start with the most well-known or most talked about things and work our way into some of the more obscure theories. First things first, I think a lot of people believe that Apple isn't innovating enough. Under Steve Jobs, it seemed like Apple released hit product after hit product. We had the new iMac lineup, iPod, iTunes, iPhone, and to a lesser extent the iPad. The timeline for those product releases was about a dozen years. You had the iMac in 1998, the iPod in 2001, iPhone in 2007, and the iPad in 2010. That's quite a while when you think about it, at least from a technological standpoint. And I think it should be noted that a lot of the incremental changes in the iPod over the years are what made the iPhone possible. just like the iPhone's incremental changes made the iPad possible. Some folks think that the incremental changes that we see year over year now in products are a sign of lack of innovation, but when you look at the past, things were really no different. Even with iPods, the jump from one generation to another was usually never that drastic, but if you looked over the span of a number of years, you would really notice the difference, and I think that's still something that holds true today. I bought an iPhone 14 Pro coming from an iPhone 12, and there are quite a few things that I noticed personally with the phone, but for people who upgraded from the 13 Pro, they probably won't notice a whole lot. That can be said with most brands and products. The huge innovation doesn't happen on a yearly basis, especially if we look within a specific product, even if we look back on the Jobs era. Then there's probably the most common thing that gets put forth, that Apple doesn't innovate because they haven't been the same since Jobs died. I'm sure that we've all heard this before, and I think it really depends on how you perceive things. The company itself isn't the same as it once was. There's no super charismatic leader who has his hands into every decision that gets made, unveils all the new Apple products, and even the things that make the company money are shifting drastically as well. In 2012, physical products made up about 93% of all revenue, with only about 7% being services. If we look at present day, that shifted to about 76% for physical products and 24% for services. With innovation, things look quite a bit different there as well. The case can be made that Apple is innovating under Tim Cook, just in different ways. The Apple ecosystem is second to none when we talk about the seamless transition between devices and moving from doing something on one device to another. And there's been huge leaps in engineering with Apple Silicon, and in the software, things like SwiftUI and the state-of-the-art GPU APIs. The difference with innovation now seems to be the shift towards more advancements in engineering versus the historical shifts with the design and how we use Apple products. Because Apple is innovating in different ways than they have historically, and because the company is so wildly different, it's tough to just straight up say that they aren't innovating. Let's just say, for argument's sake, that they are innovating in different areas, and just put that aside and come back to the product lineup. Even if Apple is innovating in other areas, are they still the same consumer-centric, design-forward company? There have been a number of decisions over the last few years that have been eyebrow-raising, and this is where, again, things are quite different. There seems to be a lack of thoughtfulness in some of their products. The touch bar on the MacBook seemed like a solution in search of a problem. We need dongles to make certain accessories or products work with each other where we shouldn't, and some things are actually getting more complicated. I'm not even sure what the iPad is supposed to be anymore. Now it seems to be trying to be a fully fledged computer, but is still on a mobile operating system. And if you've ever spent any time with things like Stage Manager, it can be pretty awkward at times. Newer products released under Tim Cook have also seemed to mimic other products versus simplifying them or making them better. The HomePod seemed to be a knee-jerk reaction to things like Google Home and home automation. Apple Music was a reaction to services like Spotify, and both of those things don't really set themselves apart from their competitors, and more products seem to be slowly moving away from at least being considered as best in category. There hasn't been much variation in Apple's product design either. Things have mostly stayed the same, even moving away from some designs like in the MacBook Pro, only to reintroduce the same things later, like more ports and MagSafe charging. It just doesn't seem to be as imaginative as it once was, and it gives off the feeling that there just may be a lack of vision. It hasn't been all doom and gloom though. In general, Apple's dedication to building quality products is still there, and there's definitely been some wins. AirPods have been wildly successful. The Apple Watch, while it isn't drastically better than some other smartwatches, is still the best option on the market in my opinion. When you do buy an Apple product, you still do have the sense that the build quality is usually not something that you have to worry about, and we also have to remember that it hasn't always been roses at any point in Apple's history. While Apple has definitely had some gaffes with recent products, they've had their fair share before too. The Power Mac G4 Cube, the third generation iPod, the iPod Mini, the Ping social network, iPod Hi-Fi. These are all things that bombed and could have also been seen as having a lack of direction. And of course there's that whole iPhone 4 AntennaGate issue. Could it be that we just don't remember the past quite the same as things that have happened more recently? The answer is yes. It turns out that saying things aren't always the way that they used to be is a psychological bias that we all suffer from due to loss aversion and having a rose-colored memory. Some polls have found that 70% of us think that the world is getting worse, and this isn't a new phenomenon. This same behavior can be dated all the way back to ancient Greece. Our minds tend to forget the bad memories and reinforce the good ones, and we can extend that here as well. Also, you start to wonder, why have we seen the question, is Apple dying, or the phrase, Apple is doomed, pop up so much over the course of Apple's long history? Besides the questions that we're asking here, Apple is at the top of the food chain when it comes to tech products, and whenever you're at the top, you're going to face a lot more scrutiny than other companies. And there's really only one way to go when you're at the top. It's just a question of when the tides turn. People also have their own biases and seem to either love or hate Apple. And because people have a strong reaction to the brand, either way you're likely to get strong opinions. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that Apple has lost its way or doesn't know what it's doing, at least not yet, because it still is the most successful tech company out there. And as of right now, it doesn't seem like they're going away anytime soon. Is there cause for concern? Sure there is. I think that we'd all like to see new groundbreaking products that we love, and maybe we will see that to some point with the VR or AR stuff that Apple is working on, or whatever else is coming down the pipe. But until one more thing isn't just an iteration on something that we've already seen, these questions will pop up more and more frequently. One thing is for sure, over the last 4 decades or so, Apple has contributed quite a bit to advancements in technology and how we interact with it, and only time will tell if that continues going forward. I know this is an extremely opinionated topic, so please leave a comment down below and let me know what your thoughts are on this matter. And please try and keep it civil. These are just brands, people. This isn't life or death. As always, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button if you want to see more tech-related content, or if you want to take turns drawing each other like one of our French girls, please subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next upload.